No, I don't want to. I want more than audio. I want a picture.
Who doesn't?
Oh, start video. Okay, so maybe it'll start me. Allow Zoom to access your.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the October 21st, 2021 regular City Council meeting. Will Councilmember Jeremy Nutting please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please let the record show that all council members are present. Council, before I begin tonight, I'd like to address a recent issue that happened over the weekend. On Saturday, October 16th, at approximately 10 a.m., our staff was made aware that 3 VMS signs that were the property of the Marina Bulkhead Project contractor had the message that read, "Go Brandon." It wasn't clear why this message was there, and it was later learned that these 3 VMS signs had been hacked. Signs in other cities were also hacked. Staff immediately worked to get this shut down. And it took until about 3 p.m. to do it on the same day. Hackers truly do understand that if you're going to hack something, the best time to do it's on a vacation, on a weekend, because it's difficult to get support. They know people aren't there all the time. But it was taken care of. There are people out there who believe that this was a political act performed on behalf of the city council or the city. And in fact, I'll just simply note that nothing could be further from the truth. Neither the city nor the city council would do such a thing, nor did they have any involvement in this. The signs have since been removed by the contractor. I would like to, at this time though, thank Bonnie Wilkins, who on the weekend did her best to coordinate this. She is our city clerk and communications director. And it ended up with Kay Lee, a civil engineer, who addressed getting these signs fixed, and while they were on vacation. That's over and above, and I very much appreciate it, as I'm sure everyone else does. So I want to thank them for taking action and getting this taken care of. Now I'll take us forward to correspondence. Is there any correspondence?
No correspondence, Mayor.
Okay, so it is now time for comments from the public and written public comments.
Thank you, Mayor. The following have provided written public comment. Landmark on the Sound, Mark Blitzer, Robert Chica, and Barbara McMichael. Edward Kozlowski, bulkhead replacement. Jeremiah Hawkins, Des Moines grocery workers deserve hazard pay. And Pam Rosencrans, Des Moines grocery workers deserve hazard pay. And our 2 guest speakers or public speakers are already admitted to the meeting.
Okay, at this time, we will be moving to comments from the public. I'd just like to remind those that any person making personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks will become boisterous, threatening, or personally abusive while addressing the council will be muted and removed from the meeting, and each individual will have 3 minutes to speak. Our first speaker is Heidi Engine. Heidi, if you're out there, you have the floor. Okay, at this point, I will go to our second speaker, Ian Littau.
Hi, everybody. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Lataw. I'm an Army veteran and a student of government and economics at Dartmouth College. I'm speaking here today to implore you to implement a hazard duty pay measure for large grocery store workers within the city of Des Moines. As the pandemic continues to rage and new, more contagious and deadly variants of COVID-19 surge, frontline workers who don't have the luxury of working and meeting remotely risk exposure to COVID-19 as we work tirelessly to help keep grocery stores open to provide crucial services to our community. This pandemic has incurred extra expenses on frontline workers, including having to sanitize their belongings and clothes, buying hand sanitizer and face masks, as well as the time and gas money to travel to testing and vaccine sites, not to mention the additional mental strain and anxiety. While seemingly small, these additional expenses add up to a significant financial burden for many working class families who are already struggling to stay afloat financially. Every day we go to work, we interact with customers and community members who are infected with COVID-19. Many other cities in the area, as well as all of unincorporated King County, have already passed a $4 per hour hazard pay for employees of large grocery stores. Now the responsibility falls on you to do the same, to protect and look after your constituents. Passing a similar measure in the city of Des Moines would ease the burden of crucial frontline workers, while specifically tailoring the measure for large grocery stores would prevent placing additional financial strain on small businesses. Large corporate grocery stores like the one where I work generate massive profits on a daily basis and can afford to provide an additional $4 an hour to its workers. To those who stand in opposition to passing such a measure, I'd say shame on you. Any such opposition comes strictly at the expense of our community members and your constituents. The working class people who have toiled tirelessly to ensure that critical resources like grocery stores stay open to the community during these trying times deserve better. Some may argue that we knew the risk when we took the job. This argument is both immoral and hypocritical, especially given that this council is still meeting remotely because of COVID. Most of my coworkers have worked at the grocery store for years before the COVID pandemic began and never signed up for what we have to deal with on a daily basis now. 70 of my coworkers have signed a petition and reached out to this council urging you to take action and do your duty to meet the needs of their community you represent. Passing this measure would not only ease the financial burden this pandemic has disproportionately placed on working class people, but show your constituents that the hard work we've done and continue to do during this public health crisis is seen and valued, and that our lives and health matter to our elected officials. I implore you to do what is right and remind you that the people of Des Moines will remember your decision as we move into election season. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Do we have Heidi on the line?
Yes, hello.
Heidi, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Okay. My name is Heidi Engen, and I work at the Des Moines Safeway. I am hoping that today's meeting will move us forward to more equity and pay for grocery workers in our area. We have experienced a lot in the past year and a half, adapting to changes in policies and protocols in the beginning of the pandemic, as well as a major influx of worried and fearful shoppers scrambling to stock up and hunker down amidst shelves that we couldn't keep full. We have borne the brunt of some of the stress and craziness that customers have been feeling during these trying times and have noticed the deterioration of civil exchanges in our stores. COVID-19 has not been our only challenge, as the decline of mental health during the pandemic has led to a climate of anything goes, where people are verbally and even physically abusive to employees, adding greatly to our stress and overall health risks. Back in February of this year, before vaccinations were available, I got COVID and believe it was transferred at work. I am but one at my place of work who has been through the ringer with COVID. Some did not fare as well and have ongoing health ramifications. We were and are considered essential workers. We did not have the option to stay safe at home working or on unemployment, making $600 extra per week. So we showed up every day and took risks to stay afloat while fearing the possibility of bringing COVID home to our families. I know firsthand as my partner tested positive for COVID just a week after me. It is but one frustration and inequity throughout the pandemic. I realize that life is not fair and there's always a lot of people in a worse predicament. However, I think what we are asking for is fair and warranted. As you know, King County, Seattle, Olympia, Edmonds, and Burien all passed a $4 or $5 hourly hazard pay to grocery workers in the last year. It is time for Des Moines to follow suit. Unfortunately, our employers are already behind the 8 ball on wages, failing to keep up with inflation or maintaining an appropriate distance between minimum wage workers and senior workers. The meager elevation in pay offered early on for a few short months by our employers was short-lived. But COVID is not short-lived. We continue to deal with the added risks in our work environments. The devastation of this pandemic, coupled with the relatively low pay, has left our stores sorely understaffed and the remaining workers physically, emotionally, and economically depleted. In conclusion, we deserve a safe and fair work environment. It seems at this point in time, safety is not guaranteed, but fairness certainly can and should be. If our employers are not willing to volunteer hazard pay for their workers that have hung in there and sacrificed so much this past year and a half, they should be required to. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. At this time, it is now time for the city manager's report.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to introduce Nicole Nordham, our Assistant Director of Parks, Recreation, and Senior Services, and she will introduce a guest that we have from SKIP who wanted to talk with council about sort of progress of SKIP at this time. Nicole?
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Nicole Nordholm, Assistant Director of Parks, Recreation, and Senior Services. And I have with us tonight the Executive Director of the South King Housing and Homelessness Partnership, which we as a city are a part of. She will be giving a brief presentation and answering questions about the upcoming 2022 work plan and budget for SKIP. So, Angela.
Hi, thanks so much, Nicole. Let me just share my screen. Give me 1 second. All right, good evening, Mayor, council members, and members of the public. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Angela Sanfilippo, the Executive Manager with South King Housing and Homelessness Partners. I wanted to take the opportunity to walk through the 2022 SKIP work plan and budget as approved by our SKIP Executive Board earlier this year. This is on your consent agenda tonight, but I thought I would take the opportunity to walk through it and address any questions that you might have. First, I just wanted to provide an overview of our process. This has really been to work with our staff work group, which is made up of members of each of our partner jurisdictions, as well as our SKIP Executive Board, to draft priorities and then conduct outreach and receive feedback from all of our partner jurisdictions during the spring and early summer, leading to a draft work plan and budget that was approved by the Executive Board in July. Consistent with our interlocal agreement, each partner legislative body also needs to adopt SKIP's annual work plan and budget, bringing us to this point tonight and being here in this last stage of the process. I just wanted to ground the overview of the budget and work plan in our mission and objectives. SKIP's mission provides broad, high-level description of our purpose to work together, share resources to create a coordinated, comprehensive, and equitable approach to increasing housing stability, reducing homelessness, and producing and preserving affordable housing in South King County. In order to achieve that mission, we've outlined 3 overarching objectives. The first being to share technical information and resources across South King County jurisdictions to promote sound housing policies. The second being to coordinate public resources that will help us to attract greater private and public investment for affordable housing into South King County. And the third one being to provide a unified voice and advocate for South King County needs and opportunities at the local, regional, as well as state levels. In terms of the work plan itself, it is broken up into 3 buckets of work that include governance and administration, policy and planning, as well as outreach and education. In each of these areas, there are work items that will reoccur year over year. These include our annual work plan and budget process that I'm going through tonight. Also includes quarterly progress and budget reports that we share with staff and our executive board of all of our partner jurisdictions, and reaching out to stakeholders and non-SKIP partner cities to provide annual updates on our progress. The policy and planning side includes building funding support. So that goes back to that increasing the investment into affordable housing in South King County. Supporting and collaborating on housing policies and strategies that help us to address displacement, fair and healthy housing, and also embed and track racial equity across our partner jurisdictions. This also includes convening a group of South King County planners. This is the SOCIO group, a sort of clever acronym. It's city and county land use planners that originally started meeting when they were working on their housing action plans, but continue to meet and be convened by SKIP staff as they work on both implementation and also forward looking into their comprehensive plan development. Outreach and education includes representing SKIP at local and regional forums. This is really key when we think about the advocacy and providing a unified voice for South King County. We also hold monthly SKIP Executive Board educational topics. These help our executive board to stay abreast of emerging issues or opportunities, current research and data that's coming out. We also work with our partner organizations and other stakeholder groups to provide broader education and engagement opportunities for elected officials, stakeholder groups, and other interested individuals. We also develop state and federal legislative priorities. This really helps us to reach that consensus for advocacy at the state level as well as the federal level, and we do that on an annual basis. And then the last one is we convene a group of South King County Joint Planners and Developers Group. It is affordable housing developers as well as staff from city and county governments. And this is really a space to collaborate across jurisdictions as well as disciplines outside of any sort of project specific work, but really to think about on higher level policies and programs across South King County that address barriers to affordable housing production or just generally housing production. In terms of areas of ongoing focus, so these are areas that we have been working on currently this year, but will continue on into the next year as well. This includes establishing our inaugural SKIP advisory board. We do have an advisory board that was just appointed in September and will hold their first meeting the very first week of November. So we're excited about that work and we'll be working in the coming months to onboard those initial advisory board members so they can really dive into and be part of our decision-making process of SKIP. We've also been working diligently throughout this year to develop an administrative plan and structure for our SKIP Housing Capital Fund. And then building support for that housing capital fund through establishing a SKIP 501c3. So late this summer, we got our Washington state nonprofit status, and we are still working towards that federal designation as a 501c3 that many of our philanthropic and corporate investors in the area have indicated the need for that to apply for grant funds or other types of investments that we might qualify for with that status. Also working directly with that South King County Joint Planners and Developers Group, as I said, to really better understand barriers to increasing housing construction and production of affordable housing across our jurisdictions. Also working with our staff work group level on existing preservation programs, sharing resources and data in terms of what is in place in different jurisdictions and really learning from each other on existing programs for affordable rental and homeownership housing. And then also working through the implementation of housing action plans, we're really working on building an inventory and monitoring program for affordable housing that's vulnerable to market pressures. So these include both regulated as well as unregulated housing that is affordable across our region. So this is a really large portion of our housing stock and helps us to really better strategize around preservation strategies and acquisition strategies to sort of keep what we have in terms of the affordable housing that exists in South King County. And then a couple things I wanted to touch on that are new areas of work for us in 2022. So this includes developing 3 to 5 year strategic goals and objectives. This will really help us with our annual planning process, as well as help establish accountability to our SKIP partners and the communities we serve to track and assess our progress in terms of achieving our overarching mission. Also, building on the inventory and monitoring of the affordable housing will help us to develop strategies for preservation of existing affordable housing and also strategic acquisition programs in South King County. Identified by both our staff work group and our executive board is the need to really understand the direct connections between SKIP's mission and our focus on the affordable housing side of our work, and how that really connects to and ties directly to homelessness services, outreach, and best practices. So we'll be working with our partner organizations to provide additional education opportunities in that area in the coming year. Also, lastly, and very important, is thinking about an equity lens for the development and implementation of all aspects of our work plan. And we're really excited about getting our advisory board really as an instrumental part of this work, and diving into this with them as one of their kind of top priorities, is to help us to really look at all of our work plan programs through an equity lens. In terms of our budget, in order to work towards a balanced budget, contributions have been increased for each of our partners. Each of our preceding years, we have not had a balanced budget, but rather have taken advantage of some cost savings due to when staff was hired to cover some of our operating costs. So this is the first increase in contributions and will help us to reach a balanced budget with 2 full-time staff members, an executive manager, and a program coordinator, as well as working with our executive board to establish a structure for compensation for our advisory board members. So we don't currently have that compensation structure in place, but it is a line item in our budget as our executive board works on that overarching structure of how to provide compensation for our advisory board members. So the table on this slide shows the population tiers that our budget contributions are based on, and then the annual contribution based on those population tiers. On the next slide, you'll see all of our partner jurisdictions and the contributions, showing Des Moines there with a contribution rate of $8,625 for 2022. With that, I will turn it back over to City Manager, and happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Angela. I remember when Nancy Backus held one of the original meetings to establish SKIP. And I think that the city was wise early on to join this regional partnership. But we appreciate how far you've come and look forward to activity. I think one thing about Des Moines is that we have continued to expand our affordable housing inventory, and even the Adriana, I think, providing fixed income for senior service for seniors, in addition to the DevCo project up on Pack Highway, New Point by Vintage as well. So there's a lot of activity here, but I think we're appreciate being part of a larger partnership, which is ultimately the solution. And I also would like to acknowledge Nicole has been involved with SKIP, Eric, Rochelle. I know Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Buxton have all had a role in this. And so we appreciate that it's multiple people from the city, but also that we're a part of your work moving forward. So council, any questions that you would have?
Okay, let me recognize the hands. I see Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Harris. I think those are the only two. So we'll start with Councilmember Bangs. And you're on mute.
Thank you, Mayor. So a couple of things, and you know, we're huge advocates of where we're going with this program, along with a lot of the objectives. I would ask, in terms of the objectives though, Angela, could you please provide a better understanding of how coordinated public resources, how are we attracting them? How will we attract them? Are you leaving that to another group like the advisory group, which I hope you're not, but where are we? Because what I'm looking at now, and it's been tough with COVID and everything, so I understand it. This isn't a I gotcha question. It's I'm really trying to understand, because what I'm looking at is this budget where we have revenues that basically, you know, allow us to have expenses paid for. And so therefore we have a zero budget. So how are we doing this? I mean, you're not going to be able to get resources enough from each of the cities to move us forward to really putting a stake in the ground and having housing for the homeless.
Yeah, Councilmember Bangs, that's a great question. I think you laid it out really well. And so what you see in front of you for the budget is our operating budget, as you have called attention to. We also have established a SKIP housing capital fund. In terms of that capital fund, at this point, it is made up of contributions from Substitute House Bill 1406. So there is sales tax credit funds that 8 of our 9 partner cities have committed to pooling into that capital fund. So that isn't shown in that operating budget that you're being asked to pass. Those public funds at this point that have been committed to that capital fund will amount to about $1 million per year. And to your point, that does not build a whole lot of housing, especially with land costs as high as they are. But it does provide us the very first ever South King County Housing Capital Fund, and helps us to be much more competitive when we think about our affordable housing developers applying for these bigger pots of fund from the Housing State Trust Fund, as well as federal tax credit dollars. So that is a way for us to really leverage additional public resources, and makes us much more competitive or not ourselves, makes our affordable housing developers much more competitive for those dollars if they have some local commitment in terms of funds. So we won't be building housing, to your point. We won't be building a lot of housing, but we can certainly provide some gap funding and leverage additional public resources. We also, with the establishment of our nonprofit arm, it really is looked at as a fundraising arm, thinking about all of our public resources, all together are not going to meet our need. The Affordable Housing Committee has done some really good modeling in terms of what costs it will take to actually meet the affordable housing need over the next just over the next 5 years, and public resources are not going to cover that. So that's some acknowledgement that we really need investment from our philanthropic and corporate institutions, and helping us to apply for those grant funds. We really need that nonprofit status, and help us to really increase the investment specifically into South King County by using SKIP as our tool to do that.
Any idea when you're going to be able to get your, right? Months, right? Okay.
So one of the things, and this is a downstream impact of COVID as well. And I think everything at the federal government tends to take a little while, but especially in COVID pandemic times, I've heard the wait is longer than usual in terms of getting those reviewed and getting that 501c3 status. So I don't have a specific date except for to say it is another kind of downstream impact of COVID and a longer wait than usual.
Thanks, Angela. I appreciate it.
Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Angela, is it part of your discussion anything to do with Section 8? I'm just struck by the fact that so many renters will say, they could find a place, but the landlords don't seem to be incentivized to accept Section 8. Is there, anything that could be done by your group to make that happen? Because that seems to be a part of the,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. I know we do have some legislation at the state level for not discriminating based on income source, but I think that gets into enforcement and who's enforcing it and how is that enforced. Section 8 vouchers do tend to be distributed through the local housing authorities. So King County Housing Authority, as well as the Renton Housing Authority. I think that's a really good point, Councilmember Harris, and something that we should be working a little more directly with the housing authorities and think about how we might be able to address exactly to your point, making sure that people are able to use those vouchers when they have them available.
No, I just wanted to make sure you were in favor of the notion, or so, the other thing is there any kind of timeline pressure as far as obtaining an inventory? Because I'm struck watching your meetings, that even the basic inventory of the different categories there's a lot of unknowns. So is there, would there be some way to say by, such and such a date, we are going to have that, we're going to have those numbers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we are very, very hopeful. We've applied for some grant funds through the Department of Commerce that will help us to actually do this with a lot more efficiency than we can with our existing staff capacity. So we hope to hear back on those grant funds by the end of this month. And the timeline that I laid out in that grant proposal would be having that inventory in place by midway through next year.
Okay, one last quick thing. Is there, when you say affordable housing, all right, does that have a specific definition that I don't quite, because and the reason I'm asking is that I went to the first meeting where desk was proposed in Burien, and it was supposed to be small homes, like a test to see if homes could be built profitably that were smaller and you could get more units on a particular, parcel. Okay. And then now it's like totally different, and so I just want to define our terms here. If am I asking am I being silly here, or,
No, not at all. I am going to give you what I hope is a sufficient answer, but it is a little bit vague, and I'll expand on this, but I'll say with a little bit of maybe humor, it depends, because it really is dependent on who the affordable housing is for. So is this for a family of 4? Is this for a single individual? What kind of incomes are they earning? Because that affordability is really dependent on your household size in terms of having something that really meets their needs, but also what is the income that they're earning. Generally speaking, HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, defines affordable to be a household not paying more than 30% of their income for housing and basic utilities. So that's
But I mean, is your organization going to drive towards particular targets of housing? At some point, are you going to say, look, we're going to have this many, you know, 8 plexes, and we're going to have this many? I mean, is that the tangible end of this, or is I'm just because basically I'm like, okay, what in the back of my mind is like, are we talking 5 years now from now, or 2 years from now, or, you know, like, yeah, I'm just trying to get a timeline to when there are actually, you know, the houses, and that's all. So yeah, but you know, if there's nothing else, I don't want to take any more time. I'm just
no, just with regard to your timeline, I will say our Housing Capital Fund, we are working towards a target of our first applications and allocation for that Housing Capital Fund being in 2022. So we would actually be looking towards awarding funds in 2022. We probably all know that that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to immediately see housing built. It takes a while to put together funding packages for affordable housing, and it does take a while to build the housing. So I can't give you a specific timeline there, except for just to say that our goal is to do our first funding awards in 2022.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so I see Councilmember Buxton's hand, but I also saw City Manager Matthias.
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
And I'll go to
I just
Councilmember
want
Buxton.
to kind of an addition to the comments from Angela. I think there were 2 fundamental premises that the City Council originally chose to engage with the South King Housing Group. And the first was an acknowledgement that substandard housing is not affordable housing. And that's a situation, a challenge that we faced in Pack Ridge and other places as well. So that was one of the premises. So part of the answer to Councilmember Harris's question is that, you know, affordable housing is based on median income, relationship to median income, and family income. And this could go all the way from 30% at the low end to 80% on the upper end relative to the type of product that's developed. And I think the second premise was that affordable housing per se, and even transitional housing for the homeless, are not sufficient responses unless they include things like access to healthcare and mental health and drug addiction, employment resources, all of those different things. And that's been the position that we've pushed at SKIP, and that we've also identified, even with our ARPA money, portions of it, to try to utilize that so that there's a comprehensive set of services available for people that need them. And we believe, and I'll speak for the council on this because this was the discussion we had, that those considerations amount to a response to affordable housing challenges and homelessness. So just to add that in. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Buxton.
Thank you, Mayor. So just to add a little to an answer for you, Councilmember Harris, that question has come up at the executive board also, and part of the answer is going to have to do with the kind of resource that we get. So now that SKIP is established, there may be continually future opportunities afforded to us by the state that cities can take advantage of. And there are always parameters around the kind of resource you get for affordable housing. So whatever we do with the resource that comes through SKIP, some of it's going to depend on what are the parameters around that resource. And that is particularly going to apply once we get this foundation set up and we partner with philanthropic organizations and individuals. It could be all over the region, all over the state. You never know if you might have a partner from, a national partner. There may be parameters around that resource. And so we're going to have to, as we partner, come under whatever, if somebody may partner with us and say they only want their resource to apply to anything that's 30% AMI and under, or somebody may say, I just want this resource to partner with 50 to 100% AMI. So it kind of depends on the resource that we attract and the partners that we attract. We're here, we're establishing this agency to be able to be flexible. And that's another reason why we, even though it's patterned after an East Side organization called Arch did not form a foundation. They have been able to move forward without philanthropic partnership. But here in South County, this is a new thing. This is a pioneering agency with this kind of thing going. So I applaud Angela and our staff at SKIP moving this thing forward. But yeah, there may be parameters around resource. So thank you.
Okay, back to you, City Manager Mathias.
Caught me off guard. Angela, thank you very much. Appreciate that. And Nicole and the work that our staff and council are doing on this. And Mayor, in the interest of time, since we have the budget presentation coming up, that concludes our manager report for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Will the clerk please read the consent calendar?
Item 1, approval of vouchers. Item 2, South King Housing and Homelessness Partnership, SKHHP 2022 budget and plan work plan, sorry. Item 3, consultant services contract amendment number 3 with Joe Dusenbury. Item number 4, amendment number 1 to the agreement for completion of the Des Moines Marina and fueling system upgrades project. Item 5, King County Flood Reduction Grant Award, Massey Creek Pocket Restoration, Fish Passage Project, and Redondo Creek Pipe Project. Item 6, 216th Street right-of-way dedication. Item 7, 2022 to 2023 on-call consultant agreements for civil engineering services. And that concludes the consent calendar, Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a motion? I see Councilmember Nutting.
Move to approve the consent calendar as read, please.
Second.
I have a second by Councilmember Bangs. Does any council member wish to remove anything from the items as read? Councilmember Harris?
First, okay, yes, items 3 and 7.
Items 3 and item 7. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there anything else? Okay, seeing none, we will vote on the consent calendar minus items 3 of 7. All those in favor of the consent calendar as amended, please raise your right hand until I call your name. Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Martinelli, Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Buxton, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, and myself. Okay, this passes 7-0. All right, that takes us forward to items 3 and item 7. We'll start with item 3. Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. This will be really quick. I'm just struck by Mr. Dusenbury. He long tenure as a harbor master and ongoing consultant, and I am just I'm being somewhat rhetorical here. I'd like the city to consider about just the long term of the expertise and institutional knowledge that he brought or has brought, will bring to the city. And is there anything more structural we should be thinking about in the future to provide I don't know, just it seems like as I go through, and it's the same thing with item 7. I'll just combine the two and we can vote on them together, however that works. Just the idea that perhaps there is some expertise that should be brought in-house in order to maintain some kind of continuity long time. I don't know what that would mean, but basically in my career, you know, you have contract employees where they're on contract for like 8-9 years, and then you realize that they actually have this knowledge base that should be incorporated into you know, the formal corporate process. Okay, that's it.
Any further discussion?
Mayor, if I may,
Please.
you know, Councilmember Joe Dusenbury retired, and he left with a huge amount of information that he you know, professionally developed in his role. We had 3 building officials who retired in the past year that represent about 120 years of experience walking out the door. That's not the only place where we've had attrition or changes. And that's one of the reasons we've emphasized so much succession planning. But I think that unless we can find a way to kind of download everything in his brain, by the grace of God, he's willing to work as a you know, consultant for the city as we work through some of the complexities related to the marina. And we're also blessed by the fact that our current harbor master was at Joe's side through all of that and has a huge amount of information himself. But I'm not sure, in answer to your question, how we can achieve the experiential knowledge when people retire. Dan, I see, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I would just say that at this council meeting, you can see our succession planning. I mean, we have our current harbor master and we have our assistant harbor master sitting in on this council meeting. And so, you know, at some point, Scott will retire. That's at least what he thinks. You know, Katie may take over. And so we're already working on succession planning even now, years ahead of the current harbor master's retirement. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I see a hand from Councilmember Bangs.
I just wanted to make a point that with our current city staff, I've heard over and over again on the several committees I've been on, whether it's municipal, whether it's environmental, that when the experience is in-house, we use it. When the experience calls for more than what we have, more than what we are capable of providing, that's when we have to have those consultants that can help walk us through so we don't get into trouble, or so we make sure we've turned every stone and they know what they're doing. And the staff works with them. They don't, come on board and go off and do their own thing. They have some very precise information and direction. I think staff has done very well with that, especially with the contracts. And, you can't ask for a better harbor master than Scott at this point, but you can't open his brain up and have somebody pour it all in. So I think we've done very well at this point, given all the, not just the turnover, but the amount of difficult work that we have, and we knew we would have ahead of us. Thank you.
Okay, so recognizing Deputy Mayor Mahoney and then Councilmember Nutting.
Thank you. In my experience in business, you use consultants when you don't want to have an FTE where you have to pay the benefits. Usually they provide a targeted expertise, which just seems to be this case. So that's good, sound business, particularly in the city. And it seems like we use them when we need them, where we need them, when the work happens, rather than have somebody waiting around. Expertise in the city is great, but the advantage of using these people that are intimate in the knowledge with the city only benefits us, and probably at the least amount of cost to the city.
Thank you, Councilmember Nutting.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Mahoney. You touched on the first part of what I was going to say, but the second part is item number 7. We're agreeing on an entire group of people that if you put them into FTEs and on the budget, there's no way we could afford them ever. So as agreeing to an entire company that has several smaller companies underneath them is more bang for our buck. So and to Deputy Mayor Mahoney's point, you're not paying L&I, you're not paying any of the expenditures on the other side of it, and you're having them pick up the rest of that. So I continually agree on these consulting measures here.
Councilmember Harris.
Okay, well, that's fine. I just wanted to, double check that, harbor master seems to be a fairly specific skill set. I'm not, this is not, nothing against Scott or anything like that. It's just that it seems like there's more work than, and hopefully there are people that, one can call on as easily as a general contractor or whatever, I don't know. It just seemed to me it's a very specific job, and the marina redevelopment is going to be a long game kind of endeavor. Thank you.
Harbor Master Wilkins.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Harris. I agree on a lot of your aspects that you're speaking of, but as you know, the marina is kind of a niche industry. And so I'm very fortunate, and I'm very grateful to Michael and Dan that encouraged my involvement in the PCC. You know of the PCC. For those council members that don't know, it's harbors, ports, and marinas from California, Oregon, Washington, Canada, and Alaska. We get together twice a year to talk everything marina. I'm on the board. I sit on the board for that organization. So I get to sit down once a month and go over information from different marinas and different ports and different states, from commercial to the pleasure boating. And we get together and we set those agendas for those upcoming meetings. The best part of that organization is I type in a question and I get 30 or 40 different responses for that. And I'll see a question that sometimes I'm able to respond to. So just that resource there, because like you said, the individual marinas, there's not any new ones being built. So the information is from the old.
Yeah, no. I'm just talking about workload. This is
and I get it. And so I know. And what I was going to say there really quickly is what I was going to say to so have that expertise from that marine industry expert like Joe that brings those history, that knowledge, those relationships with regulatory and permitting agencies. He's been there, done that. Some of those projects that he's working on now, he's done them before. So I'm just fortunate and blessed that he's there to train me, and hopefully someday I can pass that on to somebody else. So that's where I'm at. I appreciate it.
No, thank you.
Councilmember Buxton.
Like to make the motion?
Please do.
I move to approve the contract amendment number 3 with Joseph Dusenbury for consulting services through December 31st, 2022, in amount not to exceed $30,000, and to authorize the city manager to sign the amendment substantially in the form as attached.
Is there a second?
Second.
I see the second by Councilmember Nutting. All those in favor, please raise your hand until I call your name. Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Martinelli, Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Buxton, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, and myself. This passes 7-0. Councilmember Buxton.
Like to make the motion, Mayor?
Please.
I move to approve the consultant services contract for on-call civil engineering services 2022 to 2023 with Exeltech Consulting Incorporated, Gray and Osborne Incorporated, KBA Incorporated, HWA Geosciences Incorporated, KPFF. Consulting Engineers, KPG, PS. NV5, Parametrics, Pertite and Tetra Tech, each up to $1 million, and authorize the city manager to sign the consultant services contract substantially in the form as submitted.
Councilmember Nutting.
Second.
Motion was made and seconded by Councilmember Buxton, seconded by Councilmember Nutting. Any additional discussion? All those in favor, please raise your right hand or raise your hand until I call your name. I see Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Martinelli, Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Buxton, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, and myself. This passes 7-0. Okay. It's now time for the public hearing on the 2022 preliminary and annual budget. With the introduction of our city manager, Michael Mathias, I will now open the public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor. As part of the process, I mean, if you look at the RCWs, I think one of the most important things, or perhaps the most important thing that a city council is responsible for, is approving a budget for the coming year. And that process started in early October, October 5th, we brought forward the recommended budget of the city manager, which is essentially the administration recommendations. And that's also under statute that we needed to provide that to you. And so tonight is the beginning of the process with the public hearing on the budget. Couple of things about that. We anticipate opportunities between now and the second reading on November 18th. And Beth Ann will kind of highlight some of these. So a few are repetitive, but I think it's worth emphasizing. So we will make available whatever is convenient for city council members if they have specific questions or interests or want something explained, where they can come in and meet with Beth Ann and probably Jeff and whoever else and just go over their questions. So they're well prepared and any questions they have are answered. The budget, once again, kind of recounting, we are still responding to COVID. And this has been very challenging, but our emphasis this year with the council is more on what's the strategy underlying how the budget was constructed. And so we're going to spend time looking at that, as well as understanding that the ARPA money that council designated is utilized in the budget and integrated in the budget. And, we're appreciative of that resource. It allows us to do many things we wouldn't have been able to do without the ARPA funds. And I think with that, I want to acknowledge Beth Ann, who is juggling not only the hopefully final steps toward implementation of a new financial management system and payroll system, who worked to coordinate our response to ARPA, and Jeff, who also has been helping with that. Preparation of the budget and helping us survive through COVID. So Beth Ann has had at least more than she could do, and she's done all of it excellently. But I just wanted to acknowledge that before she starts. So we have a PowerPoint that we'll go through, and then we'll take any questions based on the form of the public hearing. Beth Ann, do you want to go ahead?
I can't see her.
You're muted, Beth Ann.
Oh, so I'm muted. I'm just having a great conversation on mute. Sorry about that.
I hope you're really good company.
So let me start again.
Please
Thank you,
do.
Michael. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I appreciate the reminder that I was on mute. So we're here for the public hearing on the 2022 preliminary annual budget. The city manager submitted this budget according to state legal requirements, and it is his recommended budget. Next slide, please. We covered these in the budget retreat, but the strategic underpinnings of the budget are to remain solvent and strong, work at recovering from COVID, socially, economically, and programmatically. We have had significant impacts and reforms to the administration of justice. Law enforcement has been impacted, municipal court and city attorney's office. We have redevelopment moving forward economically. We have projects occurring, and the emphasis is on sustainability and environmental protection. Next slide, please. Within the context of the strategic approaches, the following are employed in the 2022 budget. Maintain and subsidize parks and recreation and senior services. Retention of staff, which is an equivalent approach with Fund 105 and development services, that we try to bring them on for the programs, and hopefully program revenue will catch up for us. We've had some minor revenue recovery. They've done virtual programs, and we're covering startup costs for in-person programming. In 2020, because there was no access to our buildings and in-person learning, the Parks and Recreation Department had a $1.2 million revenue loss, which we're addressing over the next couple of years with our ARPA funding. This year, they were working at planning for summer breaks. Unfortunately, COVID and some of the additional variants caused us not to be able to do that. So we're keeping our fingers crossed, and hopefully we're going to be able to start doing in-person programming. The development services has implemented innovative virtual options regarding plan review, inspections, and permitting process. The court process to highlight virtual court proceedings. And we've also programmed in the budget the use of American Rescue Plan funding, which was approved by City Council on September 16th, 2021. And we've integrated that into the 2021 budget. And we're also, some expenditures are falling into 2021, right? The 2022 budget, I'm sorry. And some of the expenditures are falling into the 2021 budget, which will bring to you in an amendment on November 18th. So that impacts both years. Next slide, please. So municipal court, the law enforcement reform, the legislative impact of Senate Bill 5476 responding to the Blake decision. They've had an increased caseload due to updated criminal filing standards in King County and expanding therapeutic DUI court. Police department is looking at new policing models incorporating social service workers, expanded access to mental health and health services. And I know that's where Michael was talking about with Skip Housing, is trying to provide a comprehensive program to address some of the social and economic needs of our community and our citizens. Next slide, please. So key revenue dynamics for the general fund for 2022, we do not have an increase in our property tax imposed for 2022, and we did not take the 1% in 2021. And what we did last year, which we plan to do this year, is we will bank that capacity that we can use later. Retail sales tax has recovered faster than anticipated, despite the fact that sales tax rate has not increased. And the city of Des Moines has not increased the city's retail sales tax rate. And I believe the city manager wanted to make a couple comments.
Thank you, Beth Ann. Council, I wanted to emphasize that, it's obviously we're all aware it's a political season. And as city administration, we do not have a role in that. But I think one thing that we do have a role in is making sure that statements that appear in public accurately reflect reality. And so I'm going to make a correction here. There has been a discussion in social media, and I don't know, apparently in some of the political forums, about the city's sales tax and the role of the city relative to that sales tax. The allegation was that the city raised taxes 3.6% to cover a budget shortfall. The fact of the matter is the city, at least in my time here, and I think years before as well, has not raised sales tax. Okay. And it requires a vote of the people to do that, which has not occurred because it has not been recommended to the public to do so. There is no budget shortfall that increased sales tax has covered because there has been no increased sales tax and there is no budget shortfall. And let me just identify the 3.6% comes from the Department of Revenue that amalgamated or lumped together the county portion of the sales tax, special levies, and the city's portion. And with the 10% roughly sales tax that exists, the state gets about 6.9%. The county gets everything except for 1%, which goes to the city. Okay, and let me just give you an idea. For a $100 purchase, we would receive 85 cents. We don't even get the 1% because the state takes 0.15% for administrative costs. So we end up with at a 0.85, so 85 cents per $100. That's the reality. There was also some discussion, which I didn't totally understand, but it was to the effect that a mother buying insulin for her child could not afford it because of the sales tax on the insulin. Okay, so two things about that. There is no sales tax on pharmaceutical sales. Okay, prescriptions, drugs, etc. And if that mother could be produced and contacted me that she could not afford the insulin because of the sales tax, I'll be happy to buy the insulin for her child, because that's just not the way it works. And you know, it's disappointing and it's not a lot of fun to have to point these things out. But I think that with a lot of emphasis in this campaign, apparently, on transparency and community input, that candidates owe to their constituents and potential voters the truth of situations. So just in fairness, that's the truth of how sales tax works in the city of Des Moines, and it is not otherwise. And with that, Beth Ann, I'll let you continue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our business and occupation taxes declined due to the impact of COVID on our businesses. And again, one-time American Rescue Plan funding is assisting the city to cover the parks and recreation staff to organize and provide programming to the community. As long as we can do, it can be done safely. Hire 2 police officers and social worker services, provide funding for the reorganization of municipal court. And also in that is to help cover some of the court revenue declines during 2020 and 2021. I know their caseload has increased, but the fine revenue has gone down. Next slide, please. Here, key revenue sources for the general fund. Our largest source of revenue is property tax, and it is very stable. And like we said, we did not increase the sales tax in 2021, and we don't plan to do it in 2022, but the increase can be attributed to new construction or increase in assessed valuation. Our retail sales tax, I there's a decline in 2020, and I budgeted very conservatively in 2021. And like I said, it's actually increased more than I anticipated. So for the revised budget, we're going to increase that amount.
Beth Ann?
Yes.
Excuse me, and as a point of order, on your earlier comment, you said we did not, when you were talking about property tax, and you said we did not increase sales tax. Did you mean we did not take the 1% property tax increase?
Yes.
Point of
Sorry.
clarification.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry. We
Thank
did not
you.
take the 1% on our property tax for 2021 or 2022. But the increases in property tax can be tied to new construction.
Thank
and
you.
increases in assessed valuation on properties. And the rate on retail sales tax did not increase. However, the volume of sales has increased, which has increased the money that we receive. And actually during COVID, I believe a lot of people, by having to stay home and not go out as much, the online shopping, which I really encourage everyone, is that help, because when it gets delivered into the city of Des Moines, we have destination-based sales tax. So companies outside the state and outside Des Moines, if you order something and it's delivered to your house, the sales tax is attributed to Des Moines. So that is one phenomenon, I believe, for COVID. And also, you know, we live in the world of Amazon, so things are very easy to get. And so that has helped in that category. And the B&O taxes in 2020, the businesses were definitely impacted. A lot of them had to shut their doors. I didn't write it down as much as I need to, so I'm adjusting it down in the revised budget. But we are seeing an increase in our business. Also, there was a change in reporting for businesses that file an annual return. They don't have to file by the end of January. They have until April 15th. So that the timing of the cash flow has changed some of the estimates. Our franchise fees are pretty stable. Utility taxes have gone up. We still haven't met, utility taxes haven't gone back to our 2017 actuals. Need to kind of look into that a little further. Our red light infractions, as we know that people were not commuting, so those went down. We have, when the program started, we set the structural revenue for red light infractions at 1.5 million. And anything over that we received, the 1.5 million, we used for one-time purchases. So we didn't plan on having that extra as structural, but we haven't exceeded that amount since 2020. So, but it has been increasing a little bit as people are commuting back to work. The other 28.68% revenues from state entitlements, charges for services, other fines, and interest earnings. So our total 2022 general fund revenue budget is $24,733,109. Next page, please. So factors impacting the budget, COVID, its variants, and impact to the city programs, facilities, uncertainty regarding COVID impacts remain. I know parks and events are, being as careful as they can and making sure our citizens are safe. We have cost of living increases for staff, effective January 1st, 2022. Teamsters will receive 100% of the Seattle, Tacoma, Bremerton CPIU for October 2020 to October 2021, which is not known at this time. Our police guild, their contract ends in December 31st of this year, so they'll be going into negotiations. I don't know, Michael, do you want to say anything about the COLAs?
Yeah, prefer not to. No. So what's going on with the COLAs is that essentially, simplest way to put it, the macro perspective, there has not been significant cost of living increases over the duration of recent contracts. And what's happened is that one of the remedies from the federal government to address COVID is to hugely increase liquidity in the economy. So there's a lot more money out in the world than there was 2 years ago. And so eventually that money represents an inflationary push upward. And so cost of living increases that are tied to the consumer price index, which generally everybody's are, will establish what the COLAs are going to be, which we don't know yet, but we will soon. And I think the other thing is that every time we've done union negotiations, we come out just about in the middle of all of our sister agencies, other agencies, other governments. And it is with those governments that we are going to be competing for labor as we go forward. So, to the degree not providing COLA saves us money, it also depletes our workforce. So we have to be competitive. That's just the nature of what we do. So with that, we will, council would, of course, be involved in the negotiations relative to, we would have discussions in executive session as to what's on the table, what's the direction from council and so forth. So those are coming. Thanks, Beth Ann.
Thank you, Michael. We've got medical premium changes, Regents Assurance 5.8%, Kaiser Permanente 7.3%, Delta Dental 0 to 4%. We just today received notice for the Law Enforcement Trust Medical, which is good news. It's only increasing 1%. And then anything, the one-time American Rescue Plan funding, which we've programmed the positions 2021 through 2024, we did not budget them in 2025 or 2026. So next slide, please. So here's our forecast for the general fund. And if you notice, well, due to the uncertainties with COVID and potential economic recovery, the yearly summaries reflect conservative revenue estimates. So in 2021 through 2024, you'll see that the structural piece is in the red. That is primarily due to revenues being down and us maintaining staffing as we're navigating COVID. You can see our one-time revenues are helping us to cover that. And down below, we make sure that we meet the 16.67 minimum fund balance set by Government Finance Officers Association that we have in our code. And as we go out the years 2025 and 2026, we're getting back into the black structurally. One of the things is a lot of the redevelopment projects that we have and some of the development going on. Since my crystal ball is a little cloudy, I'm hoping that revenues will pick up in the out years, but I don't want to plan on it and plan anything structurally against that and not have it come in. So as we, as you go out farther, your assumptions are, part of the crystal ball thing, and we'll know more later and adjust for that. So if you go to the next slide, please. On the development fund, we talked about 105. That's where the development fees are flow into, and that's where staff that works on development is paid out of that. And the projects are usually, as we've said before, 1 year to 2 years. And so we know that we are not, each year we're going to be in the red, but we're still covering our costs And our ending fund balance in 2026 is still probably about 25% of our expenditures. So, and there will probably be some big projects that come in, but we don't actually plan for those until they actually come in the door. So this is our plan for the development fund, and we'll adjust in the out years. And so if development tails off in 25, 26, there will be a plan to adjust staffing to whether development picks up and we get more money, or it declines and we don't need as much staffing, and usually through attrition. So next slide, please. The Marina Fund, 2022 and 2026, there's a lot going down at the Marina. I put a placeholder in 2022 for bond proceeds for dock replacement. These may not be accurate numbers, and we will adjust probably in a budget amendment once we get more firm numbers. But as you can see that the ending working capital is positive through 2026, and it is definitely higher than 25%. And no general fund tax revenue is used to pay for Marina operations. They do pay their share of general fund costs for the use of payroll, you know, staffing, HR, finance, you know, support services that are for the city. We give them their proportional share in costs. If you go to the next slide. And that's the same with SWIM, is that they're charged their proportional share of support services. They have revenues, they cover their expenses, and the total change is because they have a very robust construction or capital improvement program for the system. But if you see that the ending working capital is still adequate, and it is above the 25%. So if we go to the next slide. Our next steps, November 18th, 2021, we have a public hearing for the 2022 preliminary annual budget. That's the second reading and adoption. We'll have a public hearing for general property tax levy and revenue sources. And note again, we're not requesting the 1% increase. And we'll have a public hearing for 2021 annual budget, our budget amendment, and questions regarding budget to set up a meeting with myself prior to November 12th, if you could. And that concludes my presentation.
The time yet. Council, I can't take questions at this time. We are in a public hearing format. I will ask for questions in a minute. And at that time, I'll recognize people. So it's now time for the public comment portion of the public hearing. Has anyone signed up to speak?
Yes.
Okay, no one has signed up to speak. So at this time, council, if you have questions, you can Banks, how we can do this. Netting, Mahoney, and Harris. At this point, I would like to let everybody know you need to be muted. We're getting a lot of background noise, so you will be muted until it's your turn to speak. So we'll start with Councilmember Bangs.
Just a simple question, Beth Ann. Do we email you to let you know we want to meet with you? What probably, I'm assuming Zoom, right? We're not meeting in person. So we email to schedule?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Nutting.
Just one quick question about the franchise fees. They haven't been the same since 2017, I think. I guess, why has that been? It seems to me that that would be a just on a level playing ground all the way across the board. You know, we'd be able to depend on what those fees are going to be, and it looks like it's been declining over the years on actuals. Do we have any idea what that's all about?
Not at this time, but I will take a look into it and get that information back to council.
Thank you.
Okay, the next person is Councilmember Buxton.
So thank you, Beth. And in regard to, well, a couple of these funds, but same question, the 105, the development fund, where we're in the red, and that gets supplemented by the general fund. How, if it doesn't pay for itself, where do you get the salaries from?
That actually, the development fund does pay for itself. And what we're using is we're using the money we collected that we put into fund balance if the project pays at the beginning. And so that the salaries will be covered out of fund balance. And then as we go, and part of the structure is if development tapers off, then we would adjust staffing for that to make sure that the fund is solvent.
Okay.
All right. May I, Mayor, also add to that? So Fund 105, when that was established, I think we took $1.5 million from the general fund to initiate the Fund 105. And if you look at it, the declining fund balance over time, that fund that was established before COVID has worked perfectly in terms of allowing us to retain critical staff as development picks back up. We're not in the process of having to go out and hire people or compete or do interviews or any of that. We have staff on board that we've been able to pay with development fees, permit fees, other things for projects that have come in, and that which we will be reviewing kind of on the back end, so to speak. So they pay, and they pay early, and then we do the work as we go. But it's allowed us to retain critical members of our development staff through the resource of development itself and not through the general fund. So it's worked perfectly under the most trying conditions, being COVID. And Susan, do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I can mention, I mean, that is exactly what you said, City Manager Mathias, is that the fees come in the front end of a permit. And so that fund balance is intended to be used to pay for the work that the applicants have paid ahead. And then we look at that every time we do the budget. So by this time next year, we'll know more about what's coming in the following years, and we'll be able to better estimate what the real development applications. And, you know, there are always developments that come in that we haven't laid in there at this point because we don't know exactly what they'll be. So there will be adjustments, and it's likely that there will be additional projects coming in.
Sorry, I just want to make, and what Susan had mentioned is that we do a very, very conservative estimate. So if there is a project coming in and we know it's going to generate significant fees, we really don't budget that until it walks in the door. And so, like Susan says, is that there will be development coming in. And so there will be additional revenue to help cover those salaries. And then as, yeah, so I mean, it's just, we're very conservative. And so that's why it's showing it's declining. But I know that we'll get some large fees in that are not in there.
Okay, then we go to Deputy Mayor Mahoney.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, scratch off Cole the question. From a strategy perspective on the budget, it looks like you basically aligned with 2018 and 2019. Is that correct? And as far as revenue sources and expenses, for the most part?
For the revenues, we tried to look at 2018 and 2019, and then also look at kind of what's been coming in 2021. Expenses, at least for salaries and benefits, we actually do it by position, and we look at that and then look at our increases. And then a lot of times the departments are very good about keeping their costs down or trying to keep their costs stable. And then anything new that comes in runs through a review at the executive level with Dan and Michael, talking to the directors. And, you know, through COVID, they've done all the departments have done a good job about being conservative and being, frugal with the city's money. So.
Agree. Thank you. This is a minor detail, but on page 77 for the Parks and Recreation on the budget, the FTEs aren't totaled. I think for clarity, if we could get that added, that would be good. I don't know if you saw the page, but all the others include a total.
Right. And there's a couple other pages that were noted. And what I found out is when I printed it, a box got checked that condensed some of the wording and some of the other areas. I will get updated pages out to the council, and also will get it posted on the website to show what got updated. And I apologize. I did not see that thing checked. And so, yes, you are correct.
No, great. I can use a calculator, whatever, but I think for simplicity, great. Another quick question is, so I noticed on both the on-street maintenance fund and the transportation benefit district, the language in there talks about 976 still awaiting the Supreme Court decision. And from my understanding, that's been made, and we should probably change that verbiage. I think the numbers look correct, but just for clarity. I had two more questions. The debt service page on the bottom. So there was a couple of ones we're very close to paying off for, I think, of the Pack Highway and some other project. I'm off the top of my head, I can't remember what it was, but it was like $275,000. And I don't know if it is in our best interest to go ahead and pay those off. Now they're probably, I don't know what the interest is on them, or if there is any, because they were specially funded projects. Would be that something we want to consider?
That's a good point to make. I can look into it and get back to you. I know the Public Works Trust Fund loans, the interest is usually very low. So I'll take a look at that, but that is a good point to make. So
yeah, I was thinking the cost to maintain and keep it on your books versus just getting it out of the way. It seemed like we could have the means to do so. And then you mentioned from the ARPA money, we add some positions. In particular, I'm talking about the police here. Is there a way to include the scenario? Because I would like to, in 2025 and 2026, make sure we keep those positions. Is there a way to look at both as we go forward, and what we might need in revenue to support those as far as keeping those positions?
Let me try and answer that. So, council member, intentionally, we did not carry those structurally into the future. Couple of reasons. One, that would put us in a position of needing to reduce other things. So it's almost like the policy decision that could come in 2024 for the 25 budget, council would be making that at this point. And so what we thought was that the rationale was that to keep the ARPA distinct and to allow a future council, if they want to retain those positions, if they have value, or they're perceived to have value and they're perceived to be a priority, that a future council will grapple with the policy aspects of using that money. But we didn't want to do that at this point, which would have really strong impact on the viability of the budget we're presenting to you.
Fair enough. Thank you, Mayor. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. At this point, I think we have Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. So Beth Ann, this is sort of an old guy thing. When years ago, like Washington was kind of late to the game in capturing sales tax by destination. It used to be the case that there was a lot of concern about compliance, and that developing a mechanism to make sure that each city or county or whatever was actually capturing, that people were actually paying it. Is there any kind of, way to check, or is there some association or state or some body that, you understand what I'm asking, just to make sure that they're all.
I do, because when we first went with destination-based sales tax, the state said that we would get, when some of the cities were losers and some were winners, and Tukwila, because of the mall and also the distribution warehouses, lost a lot of money, and they had a sales tax mitigation for those cities that lost money, because they said you're going to pick up additional revenue in the voluntary compliance to it. And I know that I was working at a city that received that mitigation money, and our voluntary compliance, I think, totaled $100 for the first 3 years. I do believe something has happened in the Marketplace Fairness Act that we've seen an increase in businesses interstate actually remitting sales tax. I don't know the specifics, but I can check with Department of Revenue about that and report back, because I have seen an increase in that compliance occur over the last few years.
Okay, now I'm just wondering if I'm assuming people are concerned about that, and because it's going to be more significant, and if there's any way that you might, you look at it and you go, yeah, that's suspiciously low, or, something like that. But it seems like the amount that we're getting is, in the ballpark of reasonable at this point. You're not concerned about that.
No, I'm not.
Okay. So sales tax up, but B&O down. Does that say anything that, I don't know, does that have any meaning that maybe not?
Well, sales tax is probably, because the Department of Revenue collects that and they have auditors that go out, that probably has a higher compliance rate, where business and occupation tax is voluntary. And, some places may not know that they owe B&O tax. We're working at getting our systems up in place so we can actually do some checking and send out letters saying, you've done business in the city of Des Moines. We'd like to get you compliant with our B&O tax rules.
Yes.
That's on our work plan after we put the financial management system in place at the first of the year. So that's on the work plan for 2022.
Yeah, thank you. Just two more quick things. If you bank the ability to raise property tax, and this may be a silly question, but how often can that be legally rolled out? Is it like once a year, or I'm just wondering how you smooth that over so that it's the minimum amount of pain if we decide we want to do that.
I'd have to check on that because I don't know that off the top of my head. But the one thing about the statutory 1% of property tax, it's not that we increase everybody's property tax by 1%. The dollar amount that we receive, that $5,300,000, we can only times that by 1%. So we would increase that dollar amount by $53,000 and then spread that over the assessed valuation. So,
No, I'm not trying to cut you off. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'll check into that.
Yeah, no, I'm just imagining the optics, not even the dollar amount, but basically, people will go, oh my gosh.
We need to keep this in question, not discussion. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mayor, may I just make a comment in regard to that 1%? It's something that as staff, we're very, very proud and pleased that we can recommend this to the council because we consider not raising the maximum that's available to us. is a statement on behalf of all of our property owners, residents, and community who have faced hardships with COVID. And this is a way of providing at least minimally and statutorily relief. So that's the basis of it. And I appreciate Beth Ann looking into any other aspect you might want to know about.
Me too. Thank you. Last but not least, I asked this last year, and when you have your 5-year forecast, it's basically just here's the general fund. And is there just a simple formula? Are you just making, a percentage assumption that sales tax will go up? What's the formula, or is there some basic thing?
Beth Ann, I would just want to start the answer to that. Okay. Every year, myself, Dan Brewer, and Beth Ann sit down in a room. I think Jeff has now joined us. And we walk through the 280 lines of potential revenue sources and look at trend and look at projections and come up with assumptions based on, ex post things that have already occurred, and then do the ex ante into the future and know that we're at a balance point at a certain moment in time. And what will the future look like? To the best of our ability, we take probably 2 days of full time to walk through every single revenue source and make the assumptions and gather the information that we know. That's the process. Beth Ann, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I'd like to add the fact that programmatic revenue from like Parks and Rec and court and anything from the other departments like the police department for animal licenses, alarm fees, we get input from the department and get their assumptions for those revenue streams. And then when we're talking about it, we make sure that those assumptions are that everybody's on the same page and we all agree about them. So we do get a lot of input from the departments as well.
Thank you.
Mayor, you're muted.
I will repeat myself. I said at this time I will close the hearing. Then I said no, I won't because I'm on mute. Now I will say I will close the public hearing. And is there a motion? I see Councilmember Nutting.
Oh, it went away.
And then I'd be chowing down.
Councilmember Bangs, do you want to take the motion?
Yes. So I move to. Oh, you're right. I move. It did go away. Sorry.
I'll make the motion.
Please make the motion.
Pass draft ordinance number 21-048 to a second reading on November 18th for further city council consideration and approval. And Councilmember Nutting?
My timeline was starting.
Second.
Really having a little bit of.
At this time, is there any discussion? Councilmember Nutting.
I just want to thank staff and the time put into this to get us to where we are. It's been tough, I'm sure, but thank you all for all the time and effort you put into it.
Second that.
Deputy Mayor Mahoney, then Councilmember Martinelli.
Yes, I love the strategy on the revenue source going back to 2018 and 2019. In business, we're doing exactly the same thing. It's the only tangible markers we have. So I want to compliment you in that strategy because that is probably the best baseline you're going to have. So great job.
Councilmember Martinelli.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually have an amendment I would like to make to the budget. I was asked by city administration that I, instead of having it voted on tonight, essentially put the idea forward to allow staff to research it, and come back with information for the next meeting. So I would like to put that idea forth now. I would like to see us amend our human services budget to go from 200,000 to 425,000. I believe that this would more appropriately address the need in our city. It would put human services at a little over 1.5% of our general fund budget, which is what CTAC and many other cities are doing. And it would make it so that the majority of applications are no longer denied under our human services budget. So that's the amendment I'd like to put forward, and I'm fine with staff doing research and having this come back next meeting.
First of all, to follow protocol, you have a motion to amend the budget by this amount pending staff research, but is there a second? Okay, so I have the motion made by Councilmember Martinelli and seconded by Councilmember Harris. Okay, okay, so at this point, we're in discussion on the proposed amendment, and I see Councilmember Martinelli and then Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to kind of re-clarify why I'm doing this, last year we had about $421,000 in requests through our human services budget. This would essentially place it so that we could accommodate all of these organizations. I would like us to also do more outreach so that we might be able to get more applications. I think that under any circumstances, I would support this, but I think particularly in a pandemic, I know we've done a lot through the ARPA funding, but I just honestly don't think it's enough. I think our human services budget is its own beast that really does a lot of good in our community. I think there's honestly no reason for us not to do this and to really help our community. It would not be near a big enough dent in our general fund to harm our reserve or to impact our credit rating. And I think this is something that, as I said, would really help the community, and we have the full authority to do it. I know it's a big jump, but when it comes to the type of organizations that our human services budget helps, I think that honestly, it's an absolute no-brainer in my opinion. And I think that the community would really, really appreciate it.
City Manager Mathias, before I call on other council members, I saw you wanted to make a comment.
I would defer to Councilmember Harris's comment, and then I'll make a comment. If that's all right.
Sure thing. I totally support the goal of spending a lot more on human services. The comment I'm about to make is basically Councilmember Martinelli posted this proposal on Facebook. Okay, I mean, what he just said ahead of the meeting. And I want you to understand, I object to that on principle. I do not think one should, do a specific policy outside the public meeting, ahead of the public meeting. And my second point is you're basically telling the administration here, find $200,000 in cuts. And I'm like, no, that doesn't thrill me. And thirdly, the HSAC process does not thrill me as it exists. There are like 50 plus, applicants apparently. The council does not see the applications that are not approved. We do not see their work product. They don't keep minutes. And so I am not willing to assume that those 50 plus are all 100% worthy. So I would ask you to reformulate if there was some way basically that the process could have a bit more oversight. I'm like, 2%, 2.5% or whatever, but simply saying $200,000 open-ended, that actually could, the thing is, it could actually just go to the same 24 or so organizations. They could just get more. It doesn't automatically bring more people into the process. So I would ask if you could propose a better process, I'm with you. Okay, just throwing more money at it, I really do struggle with that, sir. It's I'm with you on the idea, but yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I've had several hands come up, and I see your hand, Councilmember Martinelli. I will come back to you. The next person is City Manager Matthias.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to recount a little bit of the history of this process. 6 years ago, when we did our first budget with council, funding for human services was at $80,000. And the next year it went to 100,000. And always what was in the distance was the goal that council had established of getting to 1% of the general fund expenditures as the minimum that we provide to human services. But because of budget challenges, that had never been realized. So then annually we went in $25,000 increments. Starting at 80, we got to 100, and then we went to the 25. So we went to 125 one year, and the next year 150, and this year we're at 175. And all things being equal, we would have anticipated 2022 being 200,000. So we're working our way toward $250,000, which is essentially the 1% of the general fund. Okay. However, given the extraordinary nature of this year, we did a couple of things. We took $75,000 in ARPA money. Council approved this, added it to our human services, the 175. So now we got to $250,000 this year. And then we also budgeted $250,000 for next year so that we could hold the line on the 1%. So in addition to having human services, and I want to tell you, I think that we're really blessed to have both Rochelle and Nicole involved with our Human Services Commission, and that they do an incredibly great job of reviewing things and making recommendations on behalf of council that council ultimately has to approve. But we appreciate that. At any rate, just to recount, we're spending from the ARPA money, given that the human services is already at 250,000, we're spending $350,000 on social workers, including vehicles, to work with police to try and address the kind of the need for intervention in situations where social work and referrals and all of that are appropriate. We're putting $200,000 into healthcare for local residents, and so they have access and we can decentralize the availability of care. We're putting $250,000 into tenant eviction resources, and we're trying to expedite the payment of all of these, especially that one. We had a meeting today to try and do that. We're putting $300,000 into emergency transitional housing, $250,000 into utility voucher fund, and $100,000 into a nonprofit foundation to provide grants to nonprofits in the city. So that comes to a total of approximately $1.7 million. And so I don't know if Councilmember Martinelli is recommending that we decrease the 1.7 down to 400 or whatever that is. But from my view, just to implement those sort of resources that I just spoke about takes a lot of staff to do that. And the other thing, and so we want to, use the money appropriately, but I'm also need to tell you that the budget you just saw is predicated upon very complex principles, which Beth Ann alludes to and implements. And so if you start skimming at the top off of fund balance in 1 year, say you take 100,000 this year, what that does 5 years from now is you've lost 100,000 each year that would have, brought you the fund balance that's an ordinance that we have to follow, the 16.67%. This would lower us below that. So now council would have to figure out what are you not going to pay for instead. So and I'm not saying whatever council wants to do, we'll be happy to do it, but I just wanted to point out some of the complexity in this proposal. Thank you.
Next hand was Councilmember Buxton.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, City Manager Mathias. I pulled up my list. There are even a few more things, unless I missed it. 210,000 for restaurant voucher program, 100,000 for nonprofit grant program. That's not necessarily human services, but it most likely a big significant portion of that 100,000 would be. And then 125,000 for workforce training scholarships. So I would consider those also human services related. But one of my biggest concerns is if we make a policy, that's a policy decision, it's core value decision, it would be ongoing. So we'd be making a commitment of that for every year. So that wouldn't be just this year. And we just finished going over one difficult thing that's coming up in the next few years is a decision about keeping our officers. For example, we've applied some ARPA funding for public safety, and we're going to be wrestling with what are we going to do with that? That's going to be a core value issue in about 2.5 years. And so I would, with all of this that we are pouring into our community right now, whether we think maybe we should increase our human services funding or not, I would prefer to put that a little bit down the road when we're wrestling with other core values at the same time. We have all this ARPA funding right now. Our community is being incredibly blessed. A lot of people are going to be getting help in the next few years. And when that ARPA money stops and we're going to be wrestling with how are we going to balance all that, that would be a good time, I think, to bring the human services portion into the equation with the other mix. And that would be my opinion. Not now. Wait until the future and see what happens. Maybe even more federal funding coming down the pike. I don't know, but that's my opinion. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Mahoney.
Thank you. The Human Services Committee or Commission, I think, has done a great job. One of the things that I really like about them is they always review the effectiveness of the groups that they work with. In many cases, they've switched off because money not necessarily goes to the right place or is effective where it gets used, and they like to move it around to where it is effective. So I think they are a very solid group. Also, I'm remiss to have compared to CTAC, which has a cash cow in the airport and a population much less than us, as they have a lot more expendable income, and unfortunately, Burien, to use them, they're not very fiscally sound. So they might sell the farm to help out one cow. So it's kind of a tough thing in there. I'm glad, Michael and Tracy, that you put all of the other things we do, because I think that needs a fair assessment. And the question is what we will sacrifice. But I'm going to go out on a limb here, Councilmember Martinelli, and I actually will support you on this, because even though I'm not sure I would support any amendment like this, I want us to understand what we'd have to sacrifice to do that. So with that, I'm done, Mayor.
Okay, I want to make a few comments and then I'll go to Councilmember Martinelli and Councilmember Harris, because those are the last two hands that were raised. But the one thing about a proposal like this, there's no point in me reiterating all of the dollar amounts that were articulated. But when there is a shift in a budget proposed, usually there's a ripple effect, as has been articulated, and the funding's got to come. We just don't print it. It's got to come from someplace else. And I think we have been, as has been stated, very generous in that area. The other thing is, when you look at the Human Services Committee, we have a council liaison to that committee, but that committee, and we have a staff liaison to keep folks, corralled and on track. But the truth of the matter is, the reason that you don't want the council to have a vote on this and so forth is this is not a political process. This is the process of of looking at various community organizations and the community need, and seeing that those dollars that are available are allocated appropriately. The politics should never come into it, and that's part of the problem when you have people, when you have a body overseeing it like that. So with that, I will recognize Councilmember Martinelli.
Thank you, Mayor. Several things to address in those comments. I first want to, with all due respect to Councilmember Harris, say I could not disagree more. I let the public know what I was proposing tonight ahead of time rather than letting it be a surprise. I think that's what we as council members should do more of, not less of. There's no reason that these kind of proposals need to be be a surprise to the public. Letting them know ahead of time gives them time to think about it, gives them time to kind of come up with their own ideas rather than just springboarding it. In regards to the committee, I don't disagree that there are some problems with the way the committee functions, but I also think that they've done a ton of good. And I think that based on the good that they've done, I'm confident that if we were to give them extra money, that they would find proper use for it. In regards to cuts, I think everyone might have been misunderstanding what I'm proposing, and honestly, maybe this will make people less likely to support it. I'm not supporting we do anything from ARPA. I'm just saying that and also I'm not saying anything down the road. I think we are not in normal times right now. So I say if we were to make an increase in this, we could pull it from our general fund. It would not put us below the 16.9% we need, and we can reassess next year. We don't have to automatically have this amount carry over to next year. We could go back to 250,000 next year if we decide to. We are not in normal times. And I feel, with all due respect to the council, that the council just doesn't seem to fully embrace that. And I really appreciate Councilmember Deputy Mayor Mahoney supporting it for whatever the reasons may be. And I understand that we did a lot for the ARPA funding. Several of those proposals that were mentioned, I actually put forward. I understand that we've done a lot. But as I mentioned, the human services budget is its own beast. There are so many local organizations that could really flourish with $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 that they are not going to get from ARPA funding, but they may get from an increased human services budget. They don't have to be related. We've done a lot with the ARPA money, but we could do more. It doesn't have to be that, okay, we've done this, we can't do this. I think that that's sort of a fallacy. So again, I'm proposing this as a one-time increase. If we want to continue that, that's up for next year's council to decide. And I'm saying that we do not make ARPA cuts. We do not make cuts at all. We just pull it from our general fund, and that will not have to carry into next year. We can lower it if we decide to do that. I guess that's all the comments I have for now.
Councilmember Harris.
Sorry, I moved over. I guess I'll, if I may, Councilmember Martinelli, are you saying pull money from reserve, or you're saying don't cut anywhere?
I'm absolutely saying that. Yeah, I'm saying we have enough in our reserve that we can take 225,000. It'll keep us well above our 17% limit. And it does not have to be a fund that carries over to next year. We are not in normal times. People really need help now. And so I understand Councilmember Buxton's position of let's do this down the road. We may not be in the midst of such an awful pandemic several years down the road. I think that people need help now. And I think that this is something that the council could easily do. It would not have a negative impact on our future credit rating, especially if we decided to go back to a lower amount going forward. I really appreciate city administration increasing the human services budget to where we are now.
Okay, I got it. I have some other stuff. You answered the question. I'm so sorry, man, but right. So I am that old guy who's been going to city council meetings for years, and I did watch the city basically head towards the cliff. And so I'm just, back when Richard Kennedy, former mayor, designed the city website, the original Human Services Advisory Committee, you could see the minutes of every meeting. You could see who was a member. You could understand their work product without actually intervening. And they functioned like a for reals committee. And I struggle with a committee that does not produce some kind of ongoing work product, so that not in order to intervene, just to understand their process. And that's my thing. Every committee should have that kind of good process. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I will tell you that I really appreciate what you're doing here, because actually what you've proposed is more like what I would hope the budget process would be going forward. I'm not sure I agree with this particular thing, but this kind of stuff should be part of the, it shouldn't just be a review of the administration's proposal. So well done. Thank you.
City Manager Matthias and then Councilmember Bangs.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make a comment about the process. And, once again, we're completely respectful of whatever direction council wants to go. But having been the executive director of a nonprofit a number of years ago, one of the most difficult challenges, it's just something to keep in mind, because we've gone in gradations as we increased human services. But one of the curses that can visit a nonprofit, unfortunately, is when you actually do get money. And so now you expand your services, you expand your staff, and then the next year you don't get the money. So that's a situation we want to avoid in terms of helping our nonprofits and our agencies and letting them not be in the situation where they got money from us in an elevated amount one year, and then we have to cut back the next year. That in some ways, that can be maybe helpful in the short term. It's definitely not helpful in the long term. And that's one thing I appreciate about our Human Services Commission, is that, they're doing it in a gradual manner that helps people. And I don't want, and I'm not saying that would be the outcome. I'm just saying, as we consider everything, that's a caution. And Councilmember Martinelli, to be fair, you may absolutely be correct that would not have an impact in a further out year other than the immediate year if we took it from the general fund. But we would want to verify that and report back to council if this motion passes with that information. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, so let's see. I have several people that have spoken twice. I'm going to go to Councilmember Bangs. I believe she is the last one.
I would like to hear, and I appreciate that if this does pass, that Beth Ann would come back with what the impacts truly would be. But I would really like to hear from Susan or Nicole, probably Nicole more than anyone, about what this really, I heard a number, $400,000 in requests, and all these agencies were able to get, any money at all. And I don't know what that means. I don't keep track of how many agencies have actually applied, but I'd like to hear from Nicole to get a better understanding of exactly what that has, what's happened this year, realizing that we've had a huge impact over the last 2 years.
Sure. So I think I was talking with you earlier, Councilmember Bangs, but for 2021 and 2022, we had about 54 agencies apply, and it was a little over $400,000. We funded $175,000, and then we did get that increase. So we're up to, I think, 225 or 250. And it was challenging. Even just the increase partway through to figure out, because each agency, as you all know from, we have set goals and outcomes they have to make. So it was tricky to just, have this additional funding to give them, but we worked with them on how to best, increase their capacity and get to those goals. And Rochelle and I have talked for this coming cycle about how to, with both the ARPA money and then if there's additional funding, figure that out. And we've had meetings with agencies about, of course, everyone would welcome more funding, but it's tricky with especially these small agencies to make it happen. And so, I do appreciate, the desire to know more about the committee and how we pick and choose our funding and operate on a, meeting basis. We just met earlier this evening. So, I mean, yeah, I guess that's all I have to add is that it's tricky but it's not that I don't want to provide more funding.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Mayor, if you wouldn't mind, could I ask Nicole a question?
if it's quick.
Yeah, Nicole, would you say that, were all the applicants worthy? If you could have funded, if you had the magic bag of money, would you have, 100%, 90%?
Could you define worthy for us? What do you mean by?
Well, if there had been funding, adequate to support 100% of their requests, would they have all, were the cuts based on merit? Is what I'm trying to get to. I'm not trying to get into specifics,
Let her answer the question, please.
So we have a process that like specific for our city of how we kind of rate the applicants. And so, there were applicants that potentially didn't serve specific Des Moines residents or didn't meet some of the criteria that we go by. So I would say not every single applicant we had was, I don't want to say worthy, but was, able to be funded. But there were some that could have had funding that didn't get it.
One last real quick thing. So
Mr. Harris, we really need to move forward. The fact is, we have a motion on the table for the staff to study a proposed amendment of bringing human services up to $425,000. We've had plenty of discussion. People have talked in some cases 2 and 3 times. I'm at the point now where we just need to decide whether or not we want to direct staff to, if the council is supportive of this potential amendment, and we are not voting on the change to the budget. We are voting on whether or not the staff should spend the time researching it and coming back to us the next reading. So at this point, I will ask the question. All those in favor of having the staff do the research to increase the human services budget to $425,000 as noted for a 1-term with monies to be drawn directly from the general fund and the potential impact. All those in favor, please raise your hand until I call your name. I see. I see Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Martinelli, Councilmember Buxton, and Deputy Mayor Mahoney. Opposed? I see Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Nutting, and myself. So it passes 4-3. So the staff will do the research to come back to us for the second reading on what it would take, what the impact would be of increasing human services budget to $425,000. And then the council will make a decision as to whether or not that amendment would be made to the budget. So with that, we have another motion on the table, and that was to pass the draft ordinance 21048 to a second reading on November 18th, 2021 for further city council consideration and approval. All those in favor, please raise your hand until I call your name. Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Martinelli, Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Buxton, Councilmember Deputy Mayor Mahoney, and myself. So this passes 7-0. Okay, this takes us to our final item of the evening, which is the introduction of items for future consideration. Is there anything at this time? Okay, seeing no hands go forward, we will now go to our board and committee reports. And tonight we start with Councilmember Nutting.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any committee reports or board reports, but I would like to report a great win over Kennedy last night with the girls Rams volleyball team. They crushed them. It was insane. It was a great game. Anybody that wants to come out and support the Rams volleyball team, 7:15 at home tomorrow, the 22nd. And I'm not sure who they're playing, but they are poised to go to state, which is going to be in Yakima this year. Yeah, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Just regarding the signs thing, I think the city did a fabulous job. I looked at other cities and their signs were still up while, you know, after ours had been disabled. So thank you, thank you, thank you to whoever did that. And regarding the public comment, yeah, we've received a gazillion emails about the hazard pay. And Heidi, if you're still around, I want to thank you. You're literally the first Des Moines, worker that I've noticed. After the first couple of dozen, I just from somewhere else. And I fully appreciate, what you are saying. And I struggle with like how to compensate you and equitably the rest of the town who does not work at that large organization. I'm not saying you don't deserve it. It's just that, it's totally worthy. It's just, that's what I struggle with is there a mechanism for us to help everyone who has, shown up as you have? Anyway, I did go to the ultrafine particulates advisory panel with Representative Tina Orwell, and I have to say it was very encouraging. They're, doing some. We're starting to get to a point where there may be some practical interventions in terms of home air filtering schools and so forth, and they really do. It seems like make a difference in terms of health. I attended the port's budget meetings, and I was struck by the fact that they have $450 million cash on hand. They have a 14-month reserve, just parenthetically. Let's see here. And I attended the DMMA, the Marina Association meeting, and thank you to the city manager for showing up. I guess just two other rhetorical things. It is an election season. Whoever gets in next year, man, I sure hope we get this website addressed. It has just been terrible for me in terms of that whole transparency thing and outreach, and in just so many ways, the stuff that people want to talk about in terms of even racism and inclusion and everything, it starts with our digital presence, in my opinion. And I would hope somewhere in there, in the budgeting, that there is some money set aside for hybrid conferencing so that we can continue with Zoom in addition to going back to in-person meetings for those who want to participate in, not only full city council, but also committee meetings, either in person or via Zoom. That concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Buxton.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, a couple weeks ago, I attended Green Day Des Moines, and that was a really rewarding experience. That came about as a result of a grant program, a partnership with Forterra, and it involves stewarding our parks and not just maintaining green space, but also helping getting rid of invasives and then maintaining that after we clear out the parks of invasives and planting indigenous species, trees. So we worked on Sanju Park, and I really appreciate the program. There are going to be a lot of opportunities. If somebody is interested in being a park steward, all of our parks need park stewards. There right now, we only have one official park steward for with our Forterra partnership. Then I also attended the aviation town hall, and a couple of takeaways. Adam Smith said our greatest chance of mitigation, well, in my opinion, my takeaway there, greatest chance of mitigation is moving the FAA. But Adam did say regarding the FAA, really discouraging. He said the community is purely an inconvenience for them. That's a travesty. The other thing is the top 2 candidates for a new new international airport site is due in 1 year. So 1 year from now, they should have it down to 2 candidates. That's about all for that for now. And in regard to human services, we had quite a discussion, but today the Human Services Advisory Commission did meet, and we had a presentation from a fabulous organization that we support, the Children's Home Society, which also has an early care branch in Highline College, and it's the Early Learning Center at Highline. Then, just for the benefit of the staff and council, we are going to receive a presentation on December 2nd, and we'll have a great opportunity to meet the commission, hear from them about what they do, and then ask them any questions. So I'm looking forward to that. That's a council meeting on December 2nd. And then, as we are all aware, it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and there's a little 5K going on at 9 a.m. at the beach park to recognize that, as well as some agencies from around the region will be down at the quarter deck, engaging with the community, answering questions, handing out information. So if you want to come down and learn a little bit more, be encouraged. I'd encourage you to come down from 10 to 2 at the quarter deck on Saturday morning. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Martinelli.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, 1 second. I just have a couple comments tonight. I first want to acknowledge the passing of Fran Woodard. Fran was an incredibly kind-hearted and caring woman who spent many, many years volunteering in our community, including as the Grand Marshal for the parade in 2017. She was the director of the Waterland Festival and Parade for many years. It's obviously really sad to see her go, but I do think there's a lot to celebrate when it comes to the life that she lived. I also want to let the public know that at the next meeting, I will be proposing that we as a city join the nationwide Hate Has No Home Here campaign, which is a campaign designed explicitly to denounce all forms of hatred and involves several elements, including placing banners and flyers throughout the city, establishing a new section on the website. This started in Chicago, but has since spread throughout the nation and has been adopted by some nearby cities like Renton. I think that this is a small gesture and there are many other reforms that need to be done. But honestly, in my opinion, if something like this can make pretty much anyone in our community feel more comfortable in this community, then in my opinion, it's a no-brainer. And then I want to thank Heidi and Ian for calling in. I've never spoke to them before, but I think their comments are really poignant. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but I actually a few months back introduced a proposal to establish a $4 an hour hazard pay. That went to the Economic Development Committee and was tabled by that committee. The primary reason seemed to be that it was too vague and that it would have covered not just grocery stores, but pretty much all stores that had employees of 50 or more. I will be revising that proposal and coming back with it at the next meeting. I don't necessarily think the results will be any better, but I think that the workers in the city who are putting themselves at risk deserve at least another opportunity for the council to consider that. And that's all the comments I have for tonight.
Councilmember Banks.
A light committee meeting month. I did attend the Parks and Recs Arts Commission meeting the other day, and I want to thank Ashley and Katie for being always on top of whatever the agenda items are. Ashley's just awesome. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough commissioners to do any voting, which I don't really think we needed to vote, but we went over the Squidorama that will be held November 13th virtually 4 o'clock. But the artwork from the Highline School District will be on display as of November 6th during massed regular hours. And I also want to thank Mei-Ling Sproger. She has been totally on top of this Squidorama this year, and I couldn't be happier with the results. Also, the utility box wrap that's moving forward. Hopefully, we'll see something when the weather's better next year to start getting some of these boxes wrapped, and we're working with the police department on which ones really need the wrapping first, and then it'll be progressive. Went over the budget, 22 marketing, took a look at what is being proposed for park signs. Also, we had Parks and Rec Specialist Kelsey, is it Taylor?
Tyler?
Kelsey
Hi,
Cole.
What is it?
Are you talking about our employee? That would be
Yes,
Kelsey
your
Cole.
employee. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
Cole. Yeah.
All right, Kelsey did a presentation on some new ideas about team programs with Parks and Rec, which was really interesting, sounding exciting, but it's also a lot of work. So I know that hopefully those that attended that wanted to see whether, what we were all about for the Arts Commission, we had 2 new people interested. I'm really hoping that they join. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Mahoney.
Thank you, Mayor. October 30th, Saturday, we're going to have that trick or treat path. City Council will be by the theater. It's going to be great for the families. I caution you to keep your distances, wear masks, and it's a great opportunity for a lot of our businesses to get some exposure with the community. So I'm really excited about that. Want to remind everybody, it was put out by our city clerk, Bonnie Wilkins, but we have a storm. We've got leaves. Clean your drains, help the city out, avoid flooding. We're going to need that over the next few days. And I see Dan Brewer nodding in strong agreement, even the thumbs up. The Squidorama that you spoke to, I just accepted an invite to be one of the ones diving, and most of you would love me underwater because I'm not allowed to talk, but they've given me a mask this year where I can comment. So be sure to tune in and hear the panic in my voice as I try to breathe. Councilmember Buxton, I'm excited about all you've done for domestic violence in the community. I'll be down there on one condition: I can't wear purple. I have to wear crimson and gray. And then finally, I knew Fran Woodard. I worked with her very closely on the parade. And it was often that she would call me here and there all the time to give me feedback or ideas or whatever it might be, or even suggestions on context. She has been a pillar in this community, and she was obviously honored in the regard of being the Grand Marshal. I would like, or even make the proposal or a motion, whatever's necessary, that we do something with the Hearts and Minds Fund. Not sure what that is. I'm open to suggestions, but
Deputy Mayor Mahoney, typically what we would do is, if we have the support of the council, we would send flowers and a card to the family.
Okay, well, that's what, at least do that for now, is what I propose.
Favor of doing, just by a show of hands, please let me see if everybody's in favor. All council members are in favor. Our city clerk will take care of that.
And the bottom line is, she'll be sorely missed. She was somebody, the story is only a few people really make a big difference in your community, and she was one of them. And she will be missed, but I hope she's inspired others to follow. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, you took my thunder. So with that, we are at the end of our meeting. Our next meeting will be on November 4th, 2021. Is there a motion to adjourn? I see Councilmember Nutting, seconded by Councilmember Bangs. All those in favor, please raise your hand until I call your name. I see Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Martinelli, Councilmember Buxton, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, and myself. Motion passes. We are adjourned. We'll see you on November 4th.